When when we started, when we finished our last class, we decided to take a hiatus because it wasn't working out for the Chagim, and then we went to the Chagim. No one could have imagined we would return in the middle of a war. Um, and not been an easy time for Am Yisrael, not been a time for Medinat Yisrael, not been an easy time for all of us. But there's one thing we do know: we will Bezrat Hashem be victorious. There's no question, there's no shiloh whatsoever who's going to come out on the winning end. The only question is going to be what's the cost. We have to wait and see. The fact that we can hopefully rely on each other, Hashem, and do our part. And our part is not just davening. That's not sufficient. Definitely not sufficient. We have to do it. We have to pray to Hashem constantly, all day, whenever we can. But we also have to do acts of chesed. We have to help each other. We have to help the chayalim, the kochot habitachon, the various security forces. And as I've said already a few times, both here in this kind of context and online in Facebook, we need to up our game in ben adam l'chavero, how we treat each other. It's been really rotten for the last few months. It's gotten worse and worse almost every day until this war. The fact that the government's on the verge of putting together a unity government is wonderful. The fact that a large amount of the reporting in the world is very much in favor of Israel is very wonderful. The fact that Hamas is getting slammed, not just physically, may they all be rot and be destroyed, but also in the press around the world, except for many whack jobs who will just do anything to see the Jews die, is heartening. It also gives me the feel that this can only happen Erev Mashiach. I can just only hope and pray that this is the footsteps. We've been hearing the footsteps of Mashiach for quite a while, probably for the last 75 years. But now instead of footsteps, we're hearing a marathon. We're hearing a run, and he's at the door. We just need to make sure we open that door properly because, as was pointed out by President Herzog and by Lapid this last few days, from the day of the end of the Holocaust until this week, there's never been that many Jews killed in a single day in history since that day, since the end of the Holocaust. We are facing a modern day Hitler, ISIS, crusades, pogroms, Tisha B'Av, all rolled into one at the same time. I can say personally, I've not listened, and I again, some of you may have heard this already on Sunday night, but it bears repeating, that I didn't really fully understand the idea always of, you don't say hello on Tisha B'Av. It's called She'ilat Shalom. How are you? How you doing? You don't say that on Tisha B'Av. I'll tell you, when I walk by people, I almost don't say hello. I almost grunt, like hi. Don't even want to say hello to people. I haven't finished. I didn't shave since before the Chag, but even since, because I feel like it's a sense of mourning right now. We need to do both outward appearance and physical things. I don't, like I said, I'm not listening to music. By the way, just as a complete digression for a moment about music, if a person is for sure during Sphira, and for sure during a person's year of Avelut, but even if it was during the early part of the 3 weeks, if a person's very depressed and doesn't have an outlet and needs music for calming factor, that's 100% okay. I've chosen for now not to listen to music. I hope you'll listen to music very soon. In addition to our last class, which was in late August or mid-August, could also not have foreseen the fact that we would be talking about so much tonight as we will, because we're going to go back to the beginning, chapter 19, about the neshama. Because right now, unfortunately, there are at least over 1,000 people whose neshamot are returned to Hashem this last few days. Some in horrifically cruel ways. We are not able to judge what Hashem has permitted, so to speak, why it's happened. I know there are people making all kinds of pronouncements. It had to do with this, it had to do with that. Actually, Hamas themselves said that it was pretty obvious that they took advantage of the split in the Jewish people these last many months. And they saw an opening, they saw the weakness, because we know that one of the strengths of Am Yisrael is achdut, unity, not uniformity, but unity. And they saw that. They saw that was crumbling. And we are very unified. The amount of acts of chesed that I've heard of and read about in the last 48 hours has been unbelievable. Just before we came online, I saw a picture of someone put up on Facebook that in Tel Aviv, there are a number of restaurants that are treif. They're koshering their kitchens in order to be able to provide food to soldiers in the army. I mean, this is like this Mashiach stuff. And we can only pray and pray and pray that this is a very, very short, although I don't think it will be, but I would pray this will be a very short war, that we'll be able to come out on the other side with a destroyed enemy, a stronger Israel, a more unified Israel. We know that all the fingers will start pointing right after the war is over. But right now, we need to do what we can without the finger pointing, without the complaining, support each other. God forbid someone is in a position where they are extremely distressed, very sad, beyond what might be considered, quote, normal, if there's such a thing. Please let me know, be in touch privately. There are many, many resources. There's one fabulous one called Eran, ERAN. It's an English-speaking online self-help thing, or a therapist to speak to 24/7, quoting Shabbatot. I would go so far as to say that if you feel that we have a Shabbat, you must call. There's no question. You pick up the phone, you call. Okay. While I would like to discuss this more and pontificate a little bit further, I think we have to go to our Inyan, which is going back to the beginning of chapter 19. Where we left off, we're going, like I say, back to the beginning of 19 to restart the topic of the Ahava Mesuteret, or the hidden love. Oops, I just hit the wrong key here. I wanted to go to share. The other night, I was like, the first one I haven't done some classes in a few weeks, and I'm like, wait, I forgot I have to share. I forgot to put on the light on the. Takes time. Takes time to get back, especially when you're mevulbal, a little bit mixed up right now. Okay, I'm going to do this first part that you don't see any highlighting or anything. I'm going to read, translate, and re-explain, but not to the same depth which we did last time. When we get into the next slide, which is here, you'll see we'll go a little bit more into depth, because even though we did the reading of this, we didn't really go into the depth yet. Okay, so now, okay, it's not really part two, it's part one still. Again, part one, this is 1.1, I guess. Okay. So again, this chapter is going to be dealing with the topic of what is the Ahava Mesuteret, the innate hidden love that burns inside of every Jew, no matter how far or how close they may be to Hashem and to Torah. So let's start reading. In order to give some additional clarification, further clarification of this Ahava Mesuteret, he starts off with a premise that in order to understand what is this topic of the Ahava Mesuteret, this innate hidden love, he's going to use the mashal, the parable of the fact that a candle is the neshama of a person. What's the connection? Perush, explanation. The Jewish people are called Adam. Nishmatam hi lemashal ke'or haner. Their neshamot, your neshama, my neshama, is in a parable sense, like a flame, a candle. How? Shemit na'anea tamid lemala b'tivo. Remember, for those of you who were here when we did this a couple months ago, I took a Havdalah candle. I didn't light it, but I took a Havdalah candle and I pretended I lit it and I turned it upside down. And I said, no matter what direction you turn that candle, the flame is always going to try to go up. So it says, Shemit na'anea tamid lemala b'tivo. It's nature. And we're going to come back to this word nature in a few minutes. The nature of the flame of a fire is to go up. Why? Now, you can give me all kinds of scientific reasons. You can give me physics. You can give me the fact that the fire, which is energy, and the fact that it doesn't have a weight per se, and it's lighter than air, and it's again. You tell me all that, and it's all correct. But tachlis, Why does it go up? Because the fire in its nature wants to separate itself from the wick and to reconnect itself to its root or its source up above, which is Bisod ha'esh haklali shetachat galgal ha'yereach. We talked about this before, that this is a Kamoshe Katuv Eitz Chaim. That the perspective of that time of history was to remember that we talked about the various elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and that in the ancient times the yesod, or the shoresh, where it starts, where it came from, different perspectives than we might have nowadays, but it was believed that below the moon was where the source of fire would be drawn towards. So in either case, whether it is or is not is immaterial. The point is that in a parable fashion, we're saying that this flame of the wick that's being burned wants to go to its original source. That's why it's always drawn upwards. But the obvious problem with that would be, even though by doing that it will be extinguished, it will no longer give light below. What will also happen is not only will the light here no longer be giving light down here, but if it reconnects to its shorish, its root up in the shamayim, in the heavens, it will also become nullified in the presence of the greater source of fire. Nevertheless, that's what its nature is. That's what it wants. So first, let's understand what this is saying before we go any further, because there's 2 or 3 layers here. When I take a candle, it's made up of 2 things to begin with before you light it. It's made up of the base, which is usually wax or something like that, paraffin, and then there's the wick. Now, what does the wick do? The wick is the base upon which the flame catches and stays lit. As long as there's wick and there is wax, or paraffin, or whatever the material might be, it will continue to burn. If I were to snip off the wick, it would stop. It would burn the last few seconds of whatever the wick is left, and that'd be it. So imagine that the flame itself could jump off the wick. I'm not cutting it off, but the flame jumps off the wick. So what happens? Immediately it's extinguished. It's trying to reconnect with its source. But why? Because it knows that where it belongs, where it came from. It wants to go home, so to speak. He doesn't use this expression. This is my expression. The flame wants to go home to its source, in spite of the fact that 2 things are going to happen. Number 1, he will no longer give light here in this world. And number 2, when it gets up into the Shemayim, metaphorically speaking, that flame joins the massive flame that there is, and it becomes completely batel, becomes completely nullified to the fire that's there. It doesn't have its own unique identity. Nevertheless, the flame in its nature wants to do that. Even though it seems it is self-destructive. It's not suicide. It's self-destructive. It wishes to reconnect with its source. Now let's go to the next slide. Let me actually make this a little bit bigger. And now this is the other side. When you have a mashal, you have what's called a mashal, or a parable, and a nimshal, that which it is compared to. What is it trying to tell us? Now it's going to tell us really what he's saying here. Let me get my book open. Ach nishmat ha'adam. So too the neshama of a person. V'chein bechinat ruach v'nefesh. So too when it comes to his ruach and his nefesh. Let me explain something. I explained this it just happened. It was also in my Tfilah class the other night. I'm explaining it again without depth. There are different terms used for person's neshama. There's nefesh, ruach, neshama. That the neshama is the highest level. The ruach and nefesh are not at the same level, but keep in mind that they are all part of what we call the soul, because most of them are called soul in English. But even though neshama is the highest level, it says like this. So too, no matter what kind of neshama a person has, remember we talked about this a few times in the book, that the person, we are given a different level of neshama. Each person has a different level. So it says like this: so to the neshama of a person, right? And also the ruach or nefesh, no matter, even though it may be lower level. Its desire, the neshama's desire is to, in its nature, okay, in its nature, in the teva shala, to separate, to leave the body, and to cling to cleave to its source. The neshama wants at all times to want to be back, to return to Hashem. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that neshama wants you to die? Well, if the neshama leaves you, the neshama, you die. God forbid you, the person dies. So we're gonna see. But what does it mean? We're talking now in a parable fashion, that just like the flame of the candle wanted to go up to its source, even though it would no longer give light here, even though it would be completely subsumed into the giant fire in the sky, so to speak. But that's its nature. So too, the neshama of a person who desires to return to its source in order to become part of the source, i.e., Hashem, in spite of the fact, he's going to tell us in a minute, in spite of the fact that he will become batel, completely subsumed into Hashem and no longer be active, so to speak. So that's kind of strange. It almost sounds like your neshama wants a person to not be alive. But it's not really what it means. We're going to see. We're going to see what that means. Now, for those of you who learned with me or with anybody or your own Mesilat Yesharim, it talks about in the beginning of the book, the neshama of a person. It talks about, look, where does the neshama come from? Neshama comes from, we say it's a chelek elokam imal, which he talked about in depth in the very first chapter and the second chapter, thing in Tanya. It's like a piece of God. It doesn't want to be in this world. Imagine you have a choice. I give you a choice. You can live in the palace with the king, with all the finery and the clothing and the food and the pomp and circumstance, or you can live in, sorry, it just popped into my head, you can live in Watts, live in a gutter, and people spitting on you. Which would you prefer? I mean, obviously, you would not want the second, you'd want the first case. The neshama comes from a celestial, holy, all kinds of other terms, place. It doesn't want to be in the body. It has no desire to be in a physical body because the physical body has desires, has needs. What is the neshama? The neshama is completely subsumed to Hashem. Once the neshama is in this body, the neshama has basically a deal with us. Do as best as you can in this world so you don't make me messed up. Don't mess me up as a neshama. So what is really going on here? So let's take a look here. What does he say as far as what is the parable? Starting with this word here, hagam, right here. Hagam shetiyeh ayin, even though it will be nothing. Ve'efes v'titbatel sham b'metziut legamre. It will be completely subsumed into Hashem, as it were. There'll be nothing left of it. There'll be nothing, no shred of anything left, whatever, of its original state in the person. Nevertheless, in its nature, that is what it wants. That's what its desire is. So let's take, I'm going to read one more sentence actually, and then we're going to look at Rav Steinsaltz. V'teva zeh hu shem hamushal l'chol davar she'no b'mechinat tam v'da'at. Let me explain what this means. The word teva is a borrowed term. When we say it's the nature of the neshama to want this, the neshama doesn't have a particular nature. It's a borrowed term that we use when there doesn't seem to be a legitimate logical reason for something. Well, that's just the way nature is. But in this case, we're going to see, it actually makes perfect sense that the neshama wants to return to Hashem. Okay, so let's take a look at the first slide. This one here. Make this a little smaller so it fits the screen. There we go. Okay. Afal P came. Its desire, even though it will become completely subsumed back into the shoresh, i.e. Hashem. It's its desire in its nature. Va'agav hashimush bebitui betiva. Since it starts to use the expression its nature, nichnas hamechaber v'hasbir lama anu korim teva lema. Now the mechaber, the author of the sefer, is going to give us a reason why we call this action, or in general, teva, nature. So he starts off with a bold word, which is just a quote from the text. V'teva zehu shem hamushal l'chol davar she'eno b'bechinat tam v'dat. Again, the word teva is only a borrowed term for something that doesn't necessarily make sense. Now let's see what Rav Steinsaltz says. I'm on the third line, but it says Hamilat Teva in quotes. Hamilat Teva, hina b'chol asafot, that the word teva, nature, in all languages, achat hamilim hapachot beruot, is one of the lesser understood words in all language. Hishtamshu ba l'chol davar she'ba'olam. They use it for all kinds of things in the world, both for good things, for bad things, and good things. There is almost no other word that really lacks such a significant meaning of the word. If I say to you, let's just stop for a second here. Nature. Translate that. Explain. I'm new to the language. I don't know English. I don't know Hebrew. I don't know any language. And you're teaching me the word nature. You're going to teach me the word teva, tet, bet, ayin, which we've seen already a few times. What is nature? So you're going to be actually very hard pressed to give a real answer. For those of you who learned about yourself or with me, Kuzari, this is a long discussion of Kuzari. We explained that Hashem is nature. Again, not for tonight. But again, just stop. Ask yourselves, if you had to come up with a working definition, let me try something. I didn't think about this before, but you have to come out with a working definition of nature. Let's just see. I'm looking to Morenu V'Rabbeinu HaGaon Rav Google. What I have typed in, what is nature? So it gives me the following translation: the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and other features and products of Earth, as opposed to humans or human creation. I don't know. That means that I don't have any natural instincts? That's not true. Or the basic or inherent features of something, especially when seen as a characteristic of it. Okay, that's clear as mud. Another definition in Collins Dictionary: nature is all the animals, plants, and other things in the world that are not made by people, and all the events and processes that are not caused by people. Okay. I like that one actually a little bit better, but it doesn't really help a lot. So, okay. So he says that the word teva in most languages is lacking a true meaning. Ulam, however, but yachadim zot, in spite of that, along with that, the fact that it lacks a real strong definition is what explains it. How? Teva Teva means the characteristics that are embedded in something. It is something that is naturally embedded in that item, that object, that thing, to the point where we could not, that we can't really give exact understanding or explanation of them. I'm going to give you maybe a lousy example. Why is it that you have certain animals that are torfim? They are not carnivores, they are attack animals, right? It's their quote, nature. But explain it. What made them that way? How are they that way? You can't really explain that. Well, it's their nature. The mashmaut zo hamilam ena ivrit nikrait. In this meaning, the word is not actual biblical Hebrew, but it is original meaning. It comes into the English Hebrew language. Something that is coined. We have a matbe'ah. Hebrew is a coin. Why? Because it is coined in a machine. But you also use it when you talk about a phrase like the matbeah shetavu chachamim, like the coining of a phrase, like the chachamim of saying Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, meaning kamo tviat chotam, just like you have these a seal, kamo matbeah, like a coin. Teva hu hadavar shehu kavua. Teva is something that is fixed. Shehu uvda. It's a fact. A tiger wants to eat its prey, will chase. A bird will fly. A rock is domem. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there. It's a fact. We cannot change that nature. You cannot try and breed a lion that will be docile and not do it. You can't change the nature. The Navi tells us that it's used as an expression in English too. A leopard cannot change its spots. It's meant both as a physical thing and as a mashal, it's a parable. You can apply and say there are certain rules or laws that apply in nature. But you can't give an explanation. In other words, I can give you scientifically, I will give you an example. We know that if I took this glass and I had filled it halfway with water, it's only partially. Now, do you see the glass half full or half empty? Anyway, you have the glass that's partially filled with water, and then I pour oil in here. What's going to happen to the oil? We know that the oil is going to float on top of the water. And again, you can give me reasons of physics till you're blue in the face, but there's only one real reason why the oil and the water don't mix, because Hashem decreed that they will not mix. Otherwise, they would. There's a story in the Gemara, which I think I actually quoted in one of the classes a few months ago, of a woman who went to light candles on Erev Shabbat. She thought she put oil in all the cups and realized as Shabbat's about to start that she used vinegar instead. Now, we know vinegar doesn't light. It's not combustible. So her husband said, to calm her down, says the one who said that oil should burn can also decree that vinegar would burn, and it burned all Shabbat, through all Shabbat, and lasted through Havdalah. They were able to use the lights for Havdalah as well. Meaning, I can tell you physically and laws of physics and all, but tachas, give me reasons why is the lion or leopard and all these animals different than, say, a dog or a cat? They don't have the same type of nature. Wherever you can give an explanation, why it acts in one way or another, you're no longer talking about nature. But on some insight or in looking a little in depth about the idea, in other words, again, just like I said, the fact that oil and water don't mix, you can explain it based on physics, but you're just explaining the action or the inaction of those two liquids at that moment. It doesn't explain the nature per se, because we really can't put our finger on it. The nature of something is something that is always inexplicable. For those of you who are not sure what that word means unexplainable. There's also no logical reason. There's no logical reason. No one would ever say, oh, you know what? Oil and water don't mix. That's very logical. Okay, it's not a matter of logic. It's a matter of physics, but still it doesn't explain. Let's see, we did this yet. Yeah. So we said, no, we didn't read this yet. Let's go back to the text for a minute. Here, we're picking up right here. It says, Vagam Khan. So too here in our situation, we're talking about the neshama wanting to return to Hashem, and it's quote unquote nature. Also here, the fact, the intention, the idea that the desire and the will of this nefesh, it's inexplicable. We cannot say it makes sense necessarily that the neshama wants to return to a place where it will become completely subsumed. It'll completely cease to exist here. But it's above human comprehension. It's above seichel. It's above da'at. Now we're coming to a key word. It comes into, we talked about in the last chapter, that it falls in the category of chokhmah. Remember, if you remember, chokhmah we have in our minds is what we have as a direct link to Hashem. Imagine for a moment, it's not the greatest example, that in your mind you have various connectors. Connects to this, things like that. The direct line to Hashem is through chokhmah, through wisdom. That goes straight to Hashem. So it says that the idea that this neshama wants to return to Hashem, that it wants to be subsumed into God, is directly connected to the chokhmah of the nefesh, shebaor ein sof baruch hu, which is where the housing of the Hashem's his light, his infinite light, is housed in each one of us. Now, it's a lot of words. What's he saying? Let's see if we have time still to look at this next slide. וגם כאן הכוונה של רצון וחפץ זה בנפש, אינו מבחינת, we just said, השכל המושג, המובן אומר, common sense, understanding would say, אני קיים, I exist, אני רוצה להמשיך להתקיים, and I want to continue existing. תשוקת הנפש להידבק בשורשה, the desire of the neshama to cling, to cleave to its root, to its source. הגם שתתבטל שם, in spite of the fact, it's going to be nullified. It's going to be nothing. He has no logic to it. He's explaining that the definition of teva means there's no logical reason behind it. You can give explanations, you can give physics, but there's no logic behind it. The fact that the neshama wants to do something that will cause its subsuming into Hashem and won't be here in this world, it's not a matter of intellect as far as common sense. The source, the base, the fundamental principle behind every rational thought is the ani. Remember, the ego, I. Making sure I continue, I live, I exist. Or the maintaining the life of the ani, the ego. If I didn't, God forbid, value life, my life, and look, I'm going to run across the street when the cars are coming. I'll just jump over the car. Maybe if I get hit, I get hit. That's what it is. We don't think that way because we want to make sure that we live. כל ההסברה רציונלית של התופעות האנושיות חוזרת תמיד בצורה ישירה או עקיפה ולאה או מוסתרת לנקודה זו של קיום האני. Every action, every logical, rational thought we have always comes back to the same point, whether it's revealed or it's hidden, always come back to the point of self-preservation, is what we say in English. I wouldn't want to do something that would cause me to cease to exist. We can also apply this concept to when it comes to keeping mitzvot. And also the connection, regarding the connection between us and God. It's the desire, the wish that I'm drawn towards, my ego, to what? I want to grow, I want to get bigger, I want to get stronger at things. But one action, it's not the right translation, that we really has absolutely no rational explanation. Mesirat nefesh. Here comes a bit of a important point. If we're all about the ani, we have an ego, we have a desire to live, self-preservation. What drives a person to give up their life, if they needed to, for Hashem, what's called Kiddush Hashem? The concept of giving up your life for God, protecting your children. I would take a bullet for my child, all of them. Well, that goes against self-preservation. I'm going to die if I do that. That doesn't make logical sense. In this meaning, that the she'ifa, the desire of the nefesh elokit, is basically self-destruction. There's absolutely no logical reason or explanation. It's about it defies knowledge, logic. The revelation of this hidden love. When a person gives up their life for Kiddush Hashem, it doesn't come from logic or my ego and self-preservation. It's my desire to 100% be mevatel, to nullify who I am. It no longer exists. What's he saying in the 3 minutes and 11 seconds I have left here before it loses the video? This is now our first true deep insight into what is this concept of Ahava Mesuteret. We talk about the Pintaligid, we talk about even at the people who had no connection to religion at the last minute saying Shema Yisrael, or Daniel Pearl who said, I am a Jew, my mother was a Jew, and then they killed him, executed him, killed him. Where did they come from? It's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. It's the neshama, it's the person's desire, the innate Ahava Mesuteret, for the neshama to reconnect with Hashem, to do the will of Hashem. And that's the neshama speaking. It comes from the chokhmah level, the wisdom, which again is the direct line, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, to Hashem. Defies all logic. If someone were to say, hopefully you have the brain that if someone comes up to you, say, give me your money, I'll kill you, you give them the money because your life's not worth it. God forbid. But when someone says to another person, either you worship Avodah Zarah or something of that nature, or I'll kill you, we know it's Yari Gal Yavor. A Jew is always a Jew, no matter how far they have strayed. And part of that connection, that connective tissue, so to speak, is that Ahava Mesuteret, that hidden love, that innate love that Hashem has imbued us with, so that at all times the neshama recognize it. It's in there, and it's going to do what it needs to do, even at the peril of its own existence. Okay, that's enough for tonight. It's heavy enough. Bezat Hashem, all goes well. We should meet up next week. And in the meantime, wish you all a good evening. B'sarot tovot. We need some good news. We need this to be over as fast as possible with no casualties anymore.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. And we just daven for all kinds of good things, and keep your eyes open for opportunities to do chesed. Keep your eyes open for opportunities to help your fellow Jew and non-Jew. Doesn't make it help your fellow human being, especially Jews. And maybe we can bring a quick end to this. Have a laila tov, everybody.
Amen.